Vamos sentando, vamos dar início
Please take your seats. Let's begin our activities of the IX Forum 17.
A gente vai começar, a gente vai passar alguns vídeos aqui de
We are
segurança.
going to show you some safety videos as well as an institutional video of NIC.br now.
Bem-vindos ao Centro de Convenções Rebouças. Solicitamos a sua atenção para nossas recomendações de segurança. Os ambientes possuem saídas de emergência com rotas de fuga sinalizadas, equipamentos de combate a incêndio e um dispositivo sonoro que será acionado em caso de emergência. Também temos um grupo de brigadistas capacitados e preparados para qualquer eventualidade. Recomendamos que fiquem atentos e cuidem dos seus pertences, carregando-os consigo. A capacidade de cada ambiente deverá ser respeitada para garantir um bom evento. Sempre bom ter vocês aqui conosco. Tenham todos um excelente evento.
Já imaginou se você não tivesse seu direito à liberdade de expressão respeitado? Se seus dados particulares fossem divulgados sem autorização? Ou se você tivesse sua navegação filtrada por causa de interesses comerciais? A liberdade de expressão, a privacidade e a neutralidade da rede são fundamentais para a internet. E esses são apenas alguns dos 10 princípios formulados pelo Comitê Gestor da Internet no Brasil. O CGI.br promove há mais de 20 anos a internet no país. Graças a ele, você tem constante inovação, segurança e diretrizes para o desenvolvimento da internet. Isso tudo é feito de forma colaborativa, transparente e democrática. O comitê é formado por representantes de todos os setores da sociedade. Assim, as decisões são tomadas por meio do diálogo, com a participação de todos os membros até que um consenso seja alcançado. Por esses e outros fatores, o modelo brasileiro de governança se tornou referência no mundo todo. CGI.br, por uma internet cada vez melhor no Brasil.
Quando você registra um domínio .br, você está contribuindo para a melhoria da internet no Brasil, pois cada domínio que usa o .br é registrado pelo NIC.br, o Núcleo de Informação e Coordenação do .br, que além de registros de nomes de domínios, investe em análise e tratamento de incidentes de segurança, projetos de tecnologias de redes e operações, pesquisas que trazem indicadores sobre o uso das tecnologias da informação e comunicação, implementação de pontos de troca de tráfego local na internet, projetos que contribuem no desenvolvimento global da web e muito mais. Tudo isso porque o NIC.br é uma entidade civil de direito privado e sem fins lucrativos, que mantém uma estrutura de registro de domínio segura, estável e de confiança, e reverte parte do que você paga pelo seu domínio no desenvolvimento de infraestrutura, trazendo benefícios para todos que usam a internet no Brasil. Toda essa inovação, tecnologia de ponta, segurança e infraestrutura só é possível porque você tem um domínio .br. NIC.br, sempre em busca do melhor para a nossa internet.
Bom, inicialmente queria dar um bom dia para todos.
I would like to say good morning to everyone, and I would like to thank you for attending this meeting, the IX Forum 17. This is part of the 13th Internet Infrastructure Week in Brazil, promoted by NIC.br and CGI.br. Let me give you some housekeeping messages. This year, we are going to adopt a model called Silent Room. We have an exhibit area that is open and it's sharing the same space where we are. So everything that is going to happen here on stage is not going to be broadcast on loudspeakers, so you will necessarily need to use headphones to be able to hear what speakers will say. So go ahead and get ready for that. Take your headsets. This event is being broadcast live on YouTube. Let me just say something before that. I don't know if somebody mentioned that, but this event is being generated and broadcast in 3 different languages: Portuguese, English, and Spanish. On your headset, you will be able to select the language of your choice, and on YouTube, we are going to broadcast also in 3 different languages. If you're watching us remotely on YouTube, please click on like on our videos to be able to leverage the work of NIC.br. You can also send your questions using chat on YouTube. We will be monitoring the chat on YouTube, and we will select some of those questions to ask our presenters.
Era para toda a equipe do IX aqui que atende vocês estar de boné, mas por enquanto tem pouco.
We were supposed to have hats for everyone who works in the IX group, and if you want a hat like that, just stay a little bit longer. You might get one as a gift later on.
Então, é isso. Agora
I would also like to thank our sponsors, without whom it would be impossible to hold an event like that. First, I would like to thank our Platina Plus sponsor, Edge Uno, our Platina sponsor, Vital and Seletti, our Gold sponsor, Telic Technologies, WZ Tech Networks, NTT, Elea Digital, Flex Optics, UPX, H-Capture, Equinix, and our silver sponsors, Ascenti, Nokia, BR Digital, EPS Global, K2 Telecom, Sage Networks, CDN Star, Global, Sienna, Netflix, OpenX, Coherent, Pier 1, Seaborn, ASAP Telecom, Abernet, PadTech, Hurricane Electric, and Logicalis. So I'd like to thank all sponsors for their support. We are now going to play 2 videos from our Platina Plus and Platina sponsors.
A Seletti é o parceiro ideal para o seu provedor. Nós somos canal VAP Huawei e nós já atendemos mais de 5.000 clientes no Brasil todo. Huawei, Uni, Sumec, Houston, Roku, tudo aqui disponível para você crescer a sua rede. E quando você faz o cadastro na Seletti, você tem acesso ao nosso produto de locação. Você pode adquirir todos esses equipamentos em 36 vezes, sem pagar de FAO. Então não perca mais tempo. Clique no link abaixo, fale com os nossos consultores, acesse R$1 milhão da Seletti para o crescimento do seu provedor. Como eu sempre falo, vem para a Seletti.
Uma salva de palmas para os nossos
A
patrocinadores.
big round of applause to our sponsors. Now for our opening remarks and our official opening, we have Mr. Getsko here, Demi. Now you have to, make use of your headset so you'll be able to listen to his speech.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone. This is a new format for those of you who would feel like sleeping. You may sleep calmly and without any disturbance. It's a great honor to be here participating at this hub, people that get together religiously for all this forum, IX, IPv6. We have so many interesting forums and summits. It's great to be able to see so many people who we do not have a chance to see so often. I'll try to be very brief and straightforward. And I am using a very environmentally friendly presentation as well as my jokes. So the goal behind my presentation here today was made by the people from psychology and architecture, where they try to emphasize the two important aspects. First, the concept of internet, its origin. There are some important concepts, and I based myself into some of those concepts. And secondly, the eventual legislation, regulatory aspects, but we have to be careful about all these aspects. First of all, we have here a timeline just for you to have an idea that next year we are going to be celebrating 35 years of .br. Next year on April 18, we'll be celebrating 35 years of .br. And there are some other dates to be celebrated. In 89, two very important networks were opened. We had the first one running since the end of 88 and RNP also dating back from 89. We had 31 years ago, Echo 92 in Rio de Janeiro. Before we had DECnet, also TCP, IP, from a technical perspective, which has to do a little bit more to what we do daily. We have Ray Thompson, who was responsible to create the email and the use of @ as a way to make a split between the address and the person's name. For those of you that work with the projects, we have the TCP/IP and Ethernet, this pair of broadband, which is very stable, and we have that for over 40 years, and it's been very solid so far, very robust. There are some alternatives, but so far they have been very solid. DNS, domain name system, is defined by RFC 882 in 1984. In 1986, TCP/IP became the standard by the ISO ISO. Here a brief comment about our background once we see the development of internet based on ARPA, which is an advanced research project agency by the American Defense, which was a military project. Well, there are some bias saying that it's quite clear that any investment applied in the ARPANET came from the American Army. and all the concepts behind them, they were based on the cultures that they would advocate at that their time. So the money would come from the American army, but those players were from the academy players. You are very young for that, but in 1969, that was the year when we had the rock and roll festival, the famous Woodstock festival. So this is a very original slide from Postel with the first broadcast login from October 1969, the first 4 knots at ARPANET. And the second knot that you can see out of those 4 knots at Stanford, it's the NIC, the Information Center, Network Information Center. So NIC is present since the very beginning of the internet. This is a ARPANET 1971, and the most important information here is what was an advantage to ARPANET is that in its original project, it was defined that computers would not link to the network, but rather interface message processor. And computers, they would be linked to those INPs, and there are devices from different manufacturers. We have digitals, we have even a YAC4, but INPs, they would do the most complicated role to link themselves to the network. And this is a picture from Clive Rock. He's standing closer to a original IMP. The IMP that looked like a large refrigerator that became so much smaller, and now they are our routers that can be directly linked to the network. And so that was, the beginning of our internet. So that's a plaque in his office with the birthplace of the internet in 1969. This is the milestone in electrical engineering and computing. And what I also like to highlight here is that we had all the people from the university, undergraduates and graduates. And in 1969, that was the year of Woodstock, and people somehow they were affected by that. This is a slide which I had copied from Steve Crocker. He highlights some important aspects from ARPANET results. Networks are feasible, they can be heterogeneous networks, not vendor specific. A layered protocol architecture would be ideal, and Steve Crocker always highlights the need for open protocol stacks, open standards, processes different from the ITU. Now here we have an open free documentations. In the IETF, they keep on discussing about the need to save the open free documentations and open standard processes. And he emphasizes the urgency for not nuclear warfare survival and unclassified civilian use. And of course, if it was proved to be robust enough, it could be used for military use. This is also another transparency by Steve Crocker, stating that the first Intel network said that every 1.5 years we would acquire 1.5 fold the number of storage. In 10 years, that would become 100-fold higher. In 40 years, 100,000 fold much higher. And that keeps increasing year after year. So that according to the Moore's law, and computer science also had improved. And according to Steve's, technology improves, human nature doesn't. So good luck helps you in the process.
So here I'd like to show you Moore's law, indicating that the curve of development, the number of transistors are in the vertical axis. That's a logarithm curve, and actually the logarithm it's still exponential despite the fact that the y-axis was logarithmic. This is the historical cost of a terabyte. So in 1956 would be $100 trillion, but today is like a little bit more than $100, so a couple of $100, showing how much storage costs have been reduced. So I'm basically putting some basic concepts of internet, and I like to end with two laws, John Postle's law saying, and that we should be careful with what we generate, and that consensus is also very important. And the first concept relates to the Decency Act of 1996, trying to prevent pornography on the internet. Barlow, who died a few years ago, has written a Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace. And here are some excerpts of it, saying that we're creating a new world, that you may express your beliefs, you do not need to follow a specific line of thought or be silent. And this is maybe a romantic concept that dates back to 1996, but it is different from the thoughts related to military use as in the past. It's crucial that internet should maintain a neutrality of protocols. The fact that protocols are agnostic is crucial. Then protocols do not care whether information is good or bad, if it's important or if it's a joke, if it's good news or fake news. And also, it should allow free innovation, allowing us to create anything we want on the internet as long as we respect the lower layered, following the layered protocol approach. So we are free to create anything we want, and the community will determine whether that will thrive or die. And Barlow has written a book called The Economy of Mind. There are some subtitles saying like this is like selling wine without bottles. But we do not have an internet of Brazil. We have internet in Brazil. We can only make decisions that will affect the world. It is pointless to develop a fragmented network that will be applicable only locally. And Barlow also mentioned in this book that the legislation should not be related to technology because technology changes and consequently the law will become obsolete very quickly. But Brazil moved away from that original idea and moved to the internet in 1984. In 2009, after 1.5 years of discussion, CGI has written a set of rules. Some of them are obvious, such as network neutrality, also an important concept, which is that network is just an access, a pathway, so they should not have any responsibility on abuse of information or whatever is being transported on this network. Today, we have new applications. In a couple of days, there will be a discussion specifically on IPv6, big data, AI. I'm not going to dwell on that. But for Brazil, Brazil is the second largest country in terms of autonomous systems. And the name Internet comes from IP, Internet Protocol, which is a protocol in between networks, an inter-network protocol. It used to be called ARPANET in the past, as I mentioned before. And the more divided a network is, the more segmented autonomous systems participation is, the sounder it is to avoid points of failure. And Brazil has very sound networks. So it's very important for us to keep supporting autonomous systems because that will ensure a more resilient network, which is kind of a buzzword today. This is another slide by Steve Crocker. we talk about internet regulation. Without moving into discussion on whether this is good or bad, what does that mean? To define what that is, we need to define what internet is. So Steve shows here the telecom structure that supports internet. So we have optical, 5G, 4G, twisted pairs. Everything is going to go to IP, which is the bottleneck. And above that, we have the internet with protocols. And I think it's easier if we just zoom in this part. Internet ends on this layer with a lot of letters written on the white boxes. Because on top of that, we have objects that are based on the internet, but they could have different lifespans. So one thing is saying that you're regulating what has been developed on the internet. I hope nobody wants to regulate HTTP or SMTP or DNS. So theoretically, those are two different things. So when people say, well, we need to regulate the internet, people might want to replace a new IP version that would allow you more control. So we should be careful with the words we use because words have power. And if we use them incorrectly, we might create problems for ourselves. So the internet is like a substrate. And on top of it, you have great things, you have things that are not so great, but they should be analyzed by their merit, but that should not change its substrate. This substrate should be preserved. So from the CGI rules, 3 of them have led to the civil framework. Brazil is admired for its framework, its legal framework, not just because it has good governance, because the legislation is appropriate. And the civil internet framework was really appreciated when it was launched in 2014. This is a legislation that would bring more rights than punishment. So network neutrality, the fact that the network itself should not be accountable for problems, and the accountability should be for the actual players. But concepts are the same. Conditions may be different, but principles remain. You were familiar with the initiatives conducted by NIC.br, GTS and GTR met yesterday. Today, we're going to have activities on the IX Forum. There will be a presentation today on the M route. We're going to have a copy of that, and Fred might be able to explain more about that later on. There will even be a presentation on it. This is a major accomplishment. It is not very often that we have people who are so diligent like the Japanese, and now we can have a copy of it. Out of the 13 route services, we have just 12 are in Europe and just 1 is in Japan, and all the others are in the United States, actually, United States or Europe. K in the Netherlands, it's named after Karenberg, but these are the 13 route servers, and there will be an N server in Brazil soon. We're very proud about that. Brazil does very well in IX. You know that, of course. This is another point of euphemism, as I mentioned. This is Frankfurt's IX curve. It used to be the world leader. This is the daily traffic. You cannot compare the annual averages, so we do that for daily averages. This is for São Paulo. We have peaks of 22 terabps and Frankfurt probably around 16. So Brazil runs first in terms of PTT in the world. The traffic peak in Brazil And the traffic peak in Germany as well is at 10 p.m., between 9 and 10 p.m. This shows that most of the traffic relates to entertainment. You know, times used to be at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m., but today this peak is later in the evening, showing that the content that reaches our home is usually taken through the internet. NIC.br has also participated in another Brazilian initiative of artificial intelligence. So we want to be like a barometer of this area, to be a sensor of this area and how different groups are using AI. So we are using as an observatory. So that observatory includes ourselves, includes the University of São Paulo, but we are monitoring that so that we can create more information, data on this area. We've been collecting information for the past 3 or 4 years on IA, on AI. And so how OCD sees that, how Canada or Australia or Slovenia is considering that. We have a passive role, we just collect data to be referred to later on, but we want to have like an IX among AI groups so that we can exchange information. So this is how we participate in this OBIA, the Observatory of AI in Brazil. And some people are already asking questions about AI in their different surveys, so you can check that out as well. This is a slide that is rather ironic with an image from The Economist. Some countries say we need to be careful with AI. This is a risk to humankind. And so we need to be fast so that we are the first, because we do not want to lose our competitive edge. And I would like to end with a Visa quote. I've used this before because I was once asked, what is the future of the internet? I said, well, the internet is likely to disappear because when something is so ingrained in your life, when it is woven into your daily routine, you can no longer see that. So this is why we do not pay any attention to electricity unless we have a power outage. So the same is true for internet. Internet should disappear because it is already weaved into the fabric of everyday life. We were amazed when something worked, and now the new generations are surprised when something doesn't work. So I wish you a very good meeting. And again, it is an honor and a pleasure to attend this meeting with you. Thank you.
Hello. Muito obrigado, Demi.
Thank you, Demi. We are now going to start presentations. I would like to call the first speaker. We are going to report on engineering. So I am going to talk about my area. Then Moreiras and Regis are going to talk about activation. Would you like to share the stage with me? Moreiras, Rodrigo.
Bom dia. Desculpa.
Good morning. We did not introduce myself. My name is Julio Serota. I'm the manager of infrastructure of IXBR. And we have Antonio Moreiras, who is the manager of projects at SAPTO, and Rodrigo Regis, who's the coordinator of activation at IXBR. As we traditionally do every year, we would like to share with you an update. So we will tell you what we've done at NIC.br this year and what we expect to do in 2024.
Então, geralmente, a parte de tráfego, né? Esse ano a
As
gente
for
teve
traffic,
no agregado aí aumento
this
da
year,
ordem aí
the
de
year-to-date data,
20%,
we've had
né,
about
no total.
20% increase
E
in
São Paulo,
traffic,
né, que representa a
and
maior
São
quantidade de
Paulo
tráfego aí,
accounts for
na
the
ordem de 18%.
largest amount of traffic.
E
There
aí
has
eu
been an
apresento
addition
para
of
vocês, tá?
18%.
Qual foi o pico que a gente teve esse
And
ano,
these are the
nas
peaks we've
principais
had
localidades,
in the main
e qual que
locations
é
where we operate.
o avanço, né,
We also
percentual que a gente
indicate
teve,
the
tá?
percentage progress we've had in the past years.
Essa tabela aqui, ela tá embaixo aí com esses percentuais, ela só
The
compara os
bottom
dados de
table
novembro com os
compares
dados de
data
novembro do ano passado.
from November this year with November of previous years.
Em relação a número de ASNs, né?
As to the number of ASNs,
Eu mantive o número
I
tradicional aí que a
kept the
gente
traditional
coloca, tá?
number
número
that we
que
usually
tem
state,
defeito, tá?
but there's a
A
problem
gente
about
recebe uma
this
tabela
number.
de ASNs
We
alocados
get a
e
table
dentro
of
desses
allocated
ASNs
ASNs,
tem
and
grupos de
within them,
ASNs
there
que
is a
estão
group
sendo
of
recuperadas
ASNs that are
pelo
being
NIC.br,
recovered
tá? Que é
by
grupo
the
relativamente
BR
grande, da
register,
ordem aí de
which is a
900
large group that
AS, tá?
accounts for about
Então, toda vez
900
eu
ASNs.
estava contabilizando esse número, tá?
So we
Mas
used to
ele não está devidamente
calculate this
correto,
number
tá?
and take
Se
that
vocês
into account,
acessarem
but
o
it's
site do
not
NIC
very
no mapa de
accurate
AS,
because
esses
if you
AS
look
não
at
aparecem,
the
tá? Então, o número
map, you will
real
not
aí é da
see
ordem
those
de
AS, so the actual
8.800,
number
mais
is
ou menos, tá?
probably going to
Mas
be
a
around
ideia aqui é muito
8,800.
mais a gente
But the
ter uma ideia
purpose
do
here
avanço
is
do
just
crescimento
to
do número de
have
ASNs no
an
Brasil e comparar
overview
com
of
o que
how
acontece
much the number
no
of ASNs
NIC.br.
in Brazil have
Então,
increased, and compare that
o que
with
assim destaca,
connections
né,
of
em relação a
AIXBR.
e em 2023 aí a gente teve
In
aumento expressivo aí do
2023,
número
we've
de
had a
novas conexões, né?
significant
Foram quase
number of new
920, né?
connections, 920 new
E
connections.
aí embaixo aí nesse outro quadrinho eu coloco um percentual aí
And
comparando com os
here in the
últimos
bottom
anos,
chart, in
com
the
que
bottom
se alguma
table,
das
you see a
localidades
comparison with
a
other
gente
years.
analisa aí com mais cuidado, avançaram.
And you see that in some cities of Brazil, these numbers have increased.
Essa figurinha aí eu já tenho apresentado aí alguns anos para vocês,
I've
que
been
é em
showing
relação
this
ao
chart
NIC.br de
year
São
over
Paulo, né,
year.
que apresenta a
Relates
quantidade
to
de
São
interfaces,
Paulo,
né,
and
de
it shows the
portas que
number
a
of
gente tem, né?
interface, the number of
A
ports we have.
gente tem portas aí de 1 giga, 10 giga,
We
100
have 1
giga e
giga,
agora a
10
gente tem
giga, 100
400
giga
giga,
ports, and now
tá?
400 giga
Vocês vão
ports.
olhar ali, tem não sei se dá para ver bem aqui no painel.
I
A gente
think that
tem
you may be able to see that clearly
5
on the
interfaces
chart.
de 400
We
giga
have
ativas,
5 400
com
giga ports that are
3
active,
participantes operando
interfaces that
já.
are active with 4 participants using those ports.
Assim, é interessante observar, né, como a queda do número de portas de
A drop in the number
10 giga,
of
né, tem
10 giga
acontecido,
port
a
has been
média aí 10%
observed,
ao ano, e o
a
crescimento das
10%
portas de 100
drop
giga, né?
year over
Então,
year,
eu imagino
and
que o ano
also
que
a
vem,
growth
quando eu
in the number
apresentar
of
essa slide
100
de
giga
novo,
ports. So
nós vamos ter mais
probably
portas
next
de
year,
100 giga
once you
e
see this
10
chart
giga
again, we're going to
no
have more
NIC.br de São
100
Paulo.
giga ports than 10
E
giga
outra
ports
coisa também, assim, que
at
se mantém
in
é
São
o
Paulo.
número de conexões do tipo 6,
And the
que são as
6
portas de
connections also
conexão
remain.
compartilhada, né? Que é
Those
muita
are
gente
shared
chegando em São
connections. There are
Paulo
a lot of players
através
coming to São
desse tipo de
Paulo
porta, né? Então, vocês podem
using
ver
this
aí que é
type of
um
port.
crescimento aí da ordem de 13%,
You
né,
see
no ano
that it has
passado,
been an
esse ano
increase of
também a
13%
gente
vis-a-vis
continua.
last year.
Bom, vamos ao que é mais interessante, tá?
So let's move to more
A
interesting
gente
information.
desde 2016, né,
Since
quando a gente fez a
2016,
mudança de tecnologia
when
de 10
we
giga para
moved
100
from
giga,
10 giga to
a gente já
100
tinha
giga,
como meta
our
o
goal
uso de
was
VPN, o
to
uso de
use
tecnologias aí
VPN
mais
and
alinhadas ao tipo de
technologies that are
operação
more
de um Internet
aligned
Exchange, né?
with an
E
internet
a gente vem
exchange
trabalhando aí
operations.
todos esses anos junto com os
We've been
fabricantes de
working over the
equipamento de rede com
years
quem a
with
gente
network
trabalha, a gente tem parceria.
suppliers, with the
E
network
acho
manufacturers
que
we have
agora a união
partnerships with.
começa a ficar
And now
claro, né?
I
O
think that
Fábio
the
falou ontem
picture has
também, né?
become
Agora estamos
clearer
vendo
to
um pouco
us.
de luz, né?
So we see
Então,
some
a
light in
gente
the
tem
end of
expectativa
the
aí
tunnel.
que agora no começo do ano a gente vai
In the
ter a
beginning of the
primeira
year,
localidade
we expect to have the first location of NIC.br where we are going to work with VPLS, MPLS, and EVPN, as well as ARPN suppression. We will be able to eliminate a lot of broadcast traffic that we have on the network. And in these locations, since we'll take this opportunity, this location, to be precise, is going to be Brasilia. We are going to run an experiment there. We first want to see how we can implement this safely and achieve desirable results to have one single VLANs, because today we have two different VLANs, one for V4, one for V6, and we want to migrate to one single VLAN. Therefore, we're going to design a methodology to follow. We are fearful of some ripple effects because of this unification in the players network. So this is one of our goals, is running this experiment. And along these lines, we're probably going to choose a second location where we're going to operate with SRv6 and ARP and discovery suppression. This is a new technology that can be adapted to our operations. This is yet another step forward to us. These new devices, new technologies that we will use are the result of joint projects with Cisco and Nokia. Another goal we have is the migration from Bird 2, which is the software we use in our servers, to Bird 3. The main difference is that Bird 3 is mono-thread. Oh, actually, Bird 3 is multi-thread. Bird 2 is mono-thread. So the structure is different in the software. So theoretically, it's going to be more efficient. We expect to be able to work differently. In São Paulo, we have 4 different instances of Bird connected. This is what we call multi-Bird. But we hope that in the future, we'll be able to work with only one thread. Of course, we need to run tests and make an assessment to see whether this is possible or not. We've been working together with Conexzena to run tests of alpha versions. We need to detect whether the software is stable or not. So this group expects to launch this software by the end of this year. But we need to wait. Let's wait to see if this is really going to come true. Similarly, we should start in small-sized to middle-sized locations to use this software to see whether it is stable and reliable. Only then we can move forward to bigger locations for ultimately migrating to this new system. Last year, we started using 400 gigaports in São Paulo, making a transition from a data center interconnection technology of DCIs and transponders to 400 GR transceivers. We've already implemented this project. That's still underway. We cannot do everything at once. But here you see that there are some PICs that are indicated in green, and they're the ones that are already operating with 400 ER transceivers, and they can also work in together with other transceivers for the previous type. There will be 2 other PICs, the ones depicted in yellow, and we expect to have another 2 that will relate to this change. For the interconnection of players, we're going to use 400 giga LR4. It can operate up to 10 kilometers We did not know what to use LR4 or FR4, but we decided to use LR4. The price difference was not that different. As to releasing ports for new players, we have Equinix SP4, some release ports, and soon we are going to have more Pixes in addition to the ones that you see in the chart. We are analyzing the demand, the infrastructure, and to be able to release the use of these ports. In 2024, we don't expect to have 400 giga ports in other locations. If you are interested in that, please contact us so that we can make this new location a part of our 2025 plans, or maybe even implement them earlier as part of an emergency plan. As to the 10 giga transceivers, we currently use the standard 10 giga LR4. It transmits in 4 lanes of 4 giga. And we'll also provide 100 giga LR1 that uses just 1 lane. And why is that? Because this type of transceiver can be generated from a 4 giga transceiver. So it's like you break out interfaces and you can use a 400 giga port of that network equipment to connect other 4 ports of the same player of a different player. There are different transceiver manufacturers. LR1 is going to be less expensive than LR4. Is anybody in the audience using 100 giga LR1? Were you familiar with that? In Europe, there is a major movement to use this new type of transceivers. The manufacturer is even giving discounts for that. We are not going to give any discounts at this point. And we need to control where this is going to be used in the network. People say 100 giga is the new 10 giga we had 5 or 6 years ago. So that's a transceiver that is going to become a standard for connection with our infrastructure. There are many cases in São Paulo of players who are located farther than 10 kilometers. Some of them might reach 100 kilometers. We'll also provide these transceivers and 100 giga transceivers with 20 kilometers and 40 kilometers reach, depending on the need. We also need to assess the feasibility of using coherent 100 giga transceivers. This is a joint work of my team and Moreira's team. They work with development. Together, we want to improve our interface with players, to improve mail.ix.br. We are using a new data structure today to collect and organize information. 33 locations already migrated and now are using this new database. And in the beginning of 2024, we hope to use this information 100%, which will allow us to improve interfaces and services we provide to you. In parallel, we're also running another project where a new statistics collection structure will be created, connecting with equipment and networks from all locations. With that, we will be able to provide more information and better data to you. All of that together with improvements that we will implement at the site mail.ix.br. This is a screenshot of a new dashboard that Moreira's team is working on. I just wanted to show you so that you see how easy it will be on a single screen to see all the resources that you use on IXBR. You don't have that today. You need to have your own control, but we will present this information to you, what ports you're connected to, what VLANs you're using, all the operational information related to that. And in the future, we plan to implement features and automations. So if you want to replace a VLAN, for example, you can use the portal for those requirements, for those requests. I don't know if Moreira will talk more about that. Here you see the support tickets for this year. And as for locations, we have opened a new location in the capital of Rio Branco. There are other locations that we're waiting for infrastructure resources for new activations, such as Porto Velho, Caruaru, and Feira de Santana. Petrolina, Juazeiro, and Macapá are in a pre-activation phase, and Montes Claros is a location we are still studying whether it's feasible to include that as well. So let me tell you about an incident we have at a NIC NU PIX in São Paulo. There are two data centers in São Paulo. Those are the two hub PIXs. One of them is at Marginal Pinheiros, and NIC.JB, which is the data center of NIC that was built to be a data center. NIC NU is where IXBR was first created. It was the first PIX hub we've had. There are three different approaches there. 30% of connections are into different entries, so from the pole to a connection box on the sidewalk. Most of fibers are Euro fibers, and we always go for lunch and we look at this pole that looked like that. This is what it looked like. And so, well, what would happen if something happened to those poles? So, well, it happened. A truck driver hit the pole and destroyed everything. They needed to replace the pole, replace all connections. You see everything on the ground. Those who work with infrastructure and fiber can see the size of the damage. So we took this opportunity to favor us, because you don't even see the pole. All you see are wires all over, cables all over, and each company had a different duct. So we took the opportunity that the pole needed to be replaced, and we built a different approach, different entry. Two large ducts were built, and now we are going to ask all companies that survive this accident to please remove the ducts they use and use the new ducts that we installed, the new pipes we installed for cables, to avoid all the confusions that can take place, because it's unsafe to leave cables like that in such a mess. Has anybody noticed that this happened? I think nobody knew about it. This was good because that shows how robust the system is, how redundant and safe our operation is. It was really scary for us initially, but everything went smoothly. I know you're running out of time, but tomorrow in the afternoon, we are going to have a 50-minute session called Talk to Ajax. So if you have any questions, you can ask them tomorrow, or you can just talk to me directly. I'll be here all day, both days. Thank you, and I'll turn over to Moreira.
Bom dia.
Good morning. My name is Antônio Moreiras. Julio is the infrastructure and engineering manager responsible for the PTT operation, while my team supports PTT and IXBR in different aspects. And one of them has to do with technical training for the technical staff, also a project where we take contents to locations with the smaller PTTs, but we will talk about those tomorrow. My team also provides service to users. This is what we call activation. This is the provisioning of new resources, whether it's for a new user of PTT, a new player, or somebody who needs a new port. And we started doing that a few years back because we wanted to give better support to our users. We've been trying to improve year after year. Rodrigo is responsible for the activation team. And Rodrigo has brought some numbers to show the evolution in service. We know our service is not perfect, but we are making a lot of effort to improve processes and service year over year, to improve the services we provide to PTT players or users. We realize that the perception of users is not aligned with the evolutions we've had. So this is why we decided to share some figures with you showing the path we've taken so far. Let me turn over to Rodrigo. Good morning. As Moreira said, we not simply want to make a report of the activities we've implemented in 2023, but we wanted to highlight the evolution we've had on IXBR services over the years. So most of the figures we're going to share with you will focus on activation tickets, provisional bilateral pathways, and MAC replacements, number of prefixes that are increased. Those are the services that we provide on a day-to-day basis to our users. As Moreira said, we believe that the perception the community has on IXBR services, especially for those who have been longer with us, is not such a positive feedback we get. This is the sticker we have on the WhatsApp group of providers. And no, we don't like that. We feel hurt by those images, actually. So let me share with you the background since the beginning of IXBR so that we can actually see the evolution we've had, both in deadlines as other services. IXBR dates back to 2004. It has grown very quickly ever since. In the first years, the number of users, the traffic volume basically doubled year after year. And in 2015, there was even a story on Fortune magazine showing how important IXBR was to Brazil and to Latin America. And this is when we reached a peak of 1 terabit per second, and IXBR showed how important it was for the operation of internet, and it was becoming year over year an essential service to providers and autonomous systems as a whole. Consequently, the demand has increased as well. Number of tickets were increased as the network expanded. And there was a point in time where the team that would work on these tickets lacked staff to meet the demand. If you follow up the discussion list, back then there were a lot of threads with complaints, people saying that service took too long when they opened the ticket, And although we wanted to justify why it took so long and that we showing our intention to solve problems, people still criticize us a lot. In 2015, the median response time to an interaction of the user was 22 hours and 19 minutes. So a user will send an interaction through our ticket system, and the average response time was 22 hours. And later on, I will give you more information about that.
Several actions were taken. First, a task force where there were people looking after different projects, where they were trying to speed up the service. We put together an activation team which was fully dedicated just for the IX portal and also for a process improvement. Some process which were before manually, they became automated. All of that in order to improve the process as a whole. This is a table where we see year after year the number of calls and a comparison table, the number of people that were working in each one of the calls and the different places and the number of calls they increased year after year. The number of places served also increased, and the size of the team was apparently the same. With that, we had to improve the procedures to optimize. The idea was to work with fewer people to be able to reach a higher number of users in a much faster manner. During the peak of our crisis in 2018, we had about 30% of all users, just 30% of all calls were answered in less than 4 hours. Most of the calls, they would take over 24 hours to be answered. Users, they would interact to our portal and they would wait, over 24 hours to get an answer. Throughout time, we managed to improve it, where we were able to get answers within 4 hours or even less than that, where we achieved over 50% of all answers in less than 4 hours. So number of answers between 12 and 24 hours is still a little bit too high, but we did not estimate just the business hours. If a user is interacting in our portal on a Friday at 5 p.m., probably that interaction with this user will take place just after the weekend on a Monday morning. That's why we see an increasing number of answers with over 24 hours. In the meantime, the average has decreased as well as the mean. This is very typical. That is within the range of 50% if we list all the answers. Last year, we have reached a mean of 30% of participants, much better than those 24 hours that we had before in 2015. How about now? How about this year, 2023? Now we had improved these figures, and in less than 24 hours, we are able to answer 60% of all interactions in less than 4 hours. And the mean, it's went down to less than 1 hour and 50 minutes. And that's close to 2 hours. That's the median. Here we see similar numbers, but they are divided between different sites and type of calls. According to the sites, we see similar numbers, and according to the type of calls, we are able to reply with the same level of accuracy. As of November 30th, we had over 6,000 calls, single calls, which were answered by our team of analysts, with almost 40,000 interactions. In addition, also this year, we are able to finish that long queue of calls. I mean, analysts, they are able to reach the end of the day with 0 calls in their queue, in their list. Here, the days of the week with the higher number of interactions, I mean, number of users per interactions. People usually, they don't like to work as often on Fridays in comparison to the other days of the weeks. And number of interactions by users and by our teams, they mainly take place between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., business hours. Here, the answered calls. We have calls until November. We had approximately 5,700 calls. Why were we able to reply to all these calls? Because around January and February, we still answer calls that dated back from the prior year, 2022. After each call, we would send a link with one single question. Which score do you give to that call? If you would like to improve it, if you'd like to give any compliment or whatever. So our desire is that you would, answer back to our questionnaire. It's very important to get your opinion. We would like to know how satisfied you are about our service. Here we have the mean. In average, we are able to close a call in 29 days. And the mean is of 8 days to close a call. There are still some bottlenecks to be worked on, which will depend on a physical connection, and the deadline will be longer because that will depend on analysts to go to the place. And there are some sites outside São Paulo that they will rely on interface and post offices and the whole logistics, and that sometimes, is responsible for some delay. And we analyze and check all interactions. The NPS given is very high. It goes from 0 to 100, and the score we got is around 94 NPS. There are some complaints. We try to understand what those complaints are, and we get in touch with participants to better understand what happened. And we are always after improvement in the service delivered and to tackle upon those critical aspects. The goal is to speed up as much as possible the response time, to have more objective responses that will help users to better understand And since we became responsible for this role, Milton and Moreiras, they tell me that we have to work as close as possible to our users to help them to solve their issues. Many users, they find very difficult to solve technical issues. They are not able to, solve their activation problems. So we are doing our best to help our participants to solve troubleshooting during equipment setup. That's it. Well, my time is up. As Julio said, if you have any questions, keep them so we may, debate them during the forum. And here is my contact information. Thank you for your time and attention. We are going to be here throughout the whole event for your suggestions, recommendations, criticisms, whatever we can do to improve our services. As to software development and new interfaces, we have an internal team. We are doing our best to improve our services as well as internal systems, to improve our database control system, and we might get back to systems that you are gonna deploy to our new portal. So your suggestions and recommendations, they are mostly welcome. What are you lacking of? We are open to hear your comments. Our developers, they are all also available. And there is one vacancy for developers, someone who is an expert in Python, in network. If there is anyone interested in this vacancy, just come and talk to us. Any questions that were addressed via YouTube, please save them for tomorrow in the session, in the proper session for the Q&A. Unfortunately, we cannot hear. His mic is not on.
Pessoal, bom dia.
Hello, good morning. My name is Gilberto Zorelli. I am in charge of programs and projects for NIC.br, and I'm here to talk about a safe internet. This is a program which we started back in 2018. I had the chance to introduce it before, and my goal here today is to give you an update about new steps which we have just included as part of the project in this past year. So I will address our program, what are the steps of the program, who are the providers and operators. So the Safe Internet program has a website where we list all our best practices, which are promoted among all developers. Our program aims to improve routers security, to reduce any vulnerabilities during the setup phase, to disclose best practices and promote them by motivating developers' safety and security. To the left, of the slide, we have a network full of problems, several attacks. And thanks to our actions, we are able to reach a safer network, the one you can see on the right. CERT works on changing the IP addresses, which may bump into attacks. All the AS responsible, anyone who is liable for the AS will be advised about a possible attack. In addition to that, there is another step where we talk to network developers. We also discuss with the providers about the importance of a safe network and how to implement best practices and how that AS is deploying them. That is a crossover project where CERT.br will notify some safety metrics. CERT is also responsible for training, workshops. They emphasize anything regarding security, DNSSEC. We are advancing in our DNSSEC workshop. We also implement traffic filters not to allow undesirable traffic that may go through the IX. System developers, they also help us to develop a TOP. A TOP is a tool which we make available to assess security issues and communication. Communication is key. We have to communicate and convey all necessary information to our technical community. We give talks, lectures, workshops. We have several IX events which are carried out by our office, and we go all over the country. We also have our KPIs as part of the programs. Here we have a summary of all actions which are part of our program. There are several actions, but there is a very meaningful one. We talk to our providers, servers, and operators. During the pandemic, we didn't have a chance to meet our developers. We have so much restrictions, and we had to talk one to another via remotely calls. The KPIs present at the programs, I have to identify providers that may have the higher rates of vulnerabilities that are going through some changes, or if CERT is trying to send a notification message, and if that message does not reach their end users, or if a spam message is sent, we get motivated to reach anyone who is responsible for that AS. Some will reply, others won't. And please, those of you that might get a message like that, please bear in mind that that is done for a positive manner. It's just a way to notify you that you might be suffering some sort of attack, or you might be having your security under vulnerability. So I talked to several ASs, autonomous systems, throughout the month, around 6 or 7 ASs. And during our meetings, we talk about a bad setup services, the best practice adoptions by the manners, what are the recommended best practices adoptions, We also recommend the KPIs to that AS, and a report is later on submitted according to the recommendations that were given by cert.br. All the services notified by CERT can be found at the columns or by each one of the columns. Each company may have more than one AS. In addition, we can also check trends and evolution throughout the timeline. Here we have an overview since the very beginning of the program, I mean, since 2018. Over 700,000 programs were notified since the beginning of the program. Now we just have 70,000. Much has been done, but we still have more to be done ahead. These are the services which are highly notified: ISPs, ISEs, SNMPs, and DNSs, open recursive DNSs. Manners, mutually agreed norms for routing security. This is a Brazilian overview. Manners, they rely on 4 actions: BGP filters, anti-spoofing filters, coordination hubs, routing informations in the RR as well as in the RPKI. Some indicators, and let me highlight that the security incidents in the past years, they have increased, although we still have a high percentage of increase, whereas RPKI is still quite high, 27%, coordination 41%, still growing. Anti-spoofing filters, I see that in our meetings, as well as CAIDA. CAIDA tells us that not much is tested and just little is being implemented. Hi guys, it's high time that we implement anti-spoofing. If we implement them, we will prevent attacks to be taken to other networks, preventing traffic. We have now a higher manners adoption rate, around 256 users in Brazil, and a total of 904 in the world. Just in Brazil, 256. We are increasing this number in terms of compliance of new users. Kind DNS, standards for knowledge sharing for DNSSEC. And for providers, that is very important, as the recursive has to validate DNSSEC. The recursive has to validate DNSSEC. In addition to that, there is a new tool which helps you to test if that recursive can be validated or not. That is the TOP. For shared recursive DNSs, which are implemented by providers, they have to comply with a total of 7 actions, starting from DNSSEC validations, the creations of TLSs just for users who will access that recursive, the use of QName. If you have the authorization in your network, we advise you not to use the same machine, neither the same software. Primary and secondary recursive, they should be each one of them at different machines, and if possible, also geographically separate one from another. And additionally, whenever possible, we have to make available DOT and DOSs that can be extremely helpful to guarantee the DNS resolution security. TOP is a new tool to test standards. We check users' connections to know if they have IPv6, and the responsiveness will validate DNSSEC, and if that site has or hasn't IPv6, DNSSEC, TLS well implemented, and additional safety options implemented at the website. And for email, in addition of all these above, we have a DMARC, which can be extremely helpful as to phishing. You may test that website, top NIC.br. Here are some tests that have been already done. We have the above, we have the DNSSEC tests, and below IPv6 availability to end users. Over here, we see some metrics for websites and metrics for emails. There are several providers, associations that support the program, including both top and any other actions deployed by Safer Internet. Well, that's it from my side. If you have any additional questions, just reach me. This is my contact information. I'll be available throughout the event, or later on we can schedule a call and we can keep talking about this. Thank you. See you later.
Agora eu queria convidar o Ricardo Avatar, ele vai fazer uma atualização sobre a parte de recursos de mineração.
I'm sorry, you're not getting the audio of this microphone.
Bom dia. Primeiramente,
Good
agradecer.
morning. I would like to thank the IAX committee for the opportunity of coming and sharing this information with you. I know that since the end of 2020, I've not been the bearer of good news related to IPv4, but I'm just a messenger. Please do not shoot the messenger. Very briefly, I'd like to give you some updates on the policies that are discussed in the region. The policies we use for administration and allocation are determined by the community, and the community is all of us. This is part of the LACNIC scope. We've recently had a meeting of this group, and there was a policy that was approved to ensure that resources that were allocated to critical use like IX, if these allocations are canceled or restored, it should go back to a stock dedicated to this type of infrastructure. I think this was implicit, but it's good to have this documented. Another policy that was discussed and approved related to the elimination of roles are LKI when a resource is canceled. So if the provider had a given allocation and published a role with RPKI, and this role needs to be canceled. This is again implicit because the allocation will disappear from the database. So any associations with this allocation like DNE or DNS would disappear. But the community thought it would be nice to have this documented. Talking again about the LACNIC meeting, the most recent one was held in October in Fortaleza with more than 700 attendants. The next one will be in Panama in May, from May 6th to May 10th. NIC.br wants to take small and medium-sized ISPs to participate in LACNIC process. So there's a selection process for that. So in the beginning of 2024, we will open this selection process to invite ISPs to attend our May meeting. In June 2021, we started validating the security or abuse contracts of ASN, also abiding by a policy that was approved in the LACNIC region. So the information that is public needs to be up to date. This is one of the things it plans to ensure. This makes it easy for the community activities to take place whenever they need to contact an operator of a network. We have reached a level of 98% of our contacts that have been validated. Some of them went into some sort of recovery process because they have not been up to date. And the policy states that if the validation does not take place, despite all notices, they are moved to what we call a recovery process. And now, as expected, as stated in the policy, we will start a new validation process. So even if you have validated your data in 2021, you will see a new request. It's a new cycle that is starting, so please validate this information because this is expected to take place every 2 years. In this chart, we see a drop in the percentage of validation. This is what happens in the beginning of a new cycle, but we are picking up right now. So let me talk to you about ASN allocations. We have almost 9,000 ASNs that have been allocated in Brazil. 231 were allocated in 2023, but compared to previous years, as expected, given to the reduction of IPv4, these numbers are shrinking. So you see that in 2020, you had a peak with over 1,200 because people knew that we were close to the end of IPv4. So those who wanted to get the IPv4 blocks, they did it. And this is why there was this peak in 2020, but that number started dropping since then. At IPv6 allocations, we're doing very well. 97.6% of ACNs have an IPv6 allocation. There were 311 allocations in 2022 and 228 year to date. Allocation on its own does not mean a lot. It's important to keep track of the use. Google and other companies verify and measure the traffic volume of IPv6. In the case of Google, almost 47% of the traffic that reaches their servers from Brazil use IPv6. We measure this internally in our systems. 48% of the traffic that gets to our servers use IPv6. So we are almost getting to the long expected 50%. So I talked about ACN, IPv6, so now let's talk about IPv4. It's not good news. You see that the waiting line for IPv4 keeps growing. We've reached 1,000 requests in line in January 23. Now it's 1,208. The drops we see in the chart in previous years related to releases that have been made, and therefore the number of requests in the queue will be reduced. But that has not been true in the past years. Although there are some releases, they are too small and they do not have any impact on this chart. This is the number of IP addresses that will be required to meet the demand. We would need a record level of over 1 million IPv4 addresses to serve everyone who's in the queue in June 2023, and that number keeps increasing. Here we make a comparison of the number of requests in queue and the number of addresses that have been released. And because of this mismatch, the queue keeps growing. But that's our current scenario. If you need more IPv4, you can just have an IPv6 at first to ensure your position in line, and as soon as this is released, we can meet these demands. Now, let me talk about IPv4 transfers. This is an interesting topic that has led to a lot of demand of work in our team. Here you see the number of requests or transfer processes that have been approved and implemented. There's a very shy curve in the first years as of 2017, but the curve grows exponentially as of 2020. Transfers are allowed. There is a rule that states that they are allowed, but it's not allowed to rent them. We know that technically this is possible. If you put them in the router, it will go through, but the rules do not allow that. We know that some providers choose this route, but here's our warning, the rule does not allow it. So if this allocation is detected, it will be canceled. We understand the need of different operations, but it is our responsibility to abide by the rules. So we cannot turn the blind eye to that. If this breach is detected, then these allocations could be canceled. If we are using this path, the risk of putting clients or services on top of addresses that of which they have no control, they do not own that. That's a risk. Things can happen to this company that has ownership, and this is why there is no way you can argue or do something about that. This is the volume of requests of transfers or actual transfers. There was a very high number of transferred IP addresses, transfers of larger blocks some years ago. And now there is something that people feel curious about, and that leads to a lot of discussions and concerns. We've heard these discussions before in different forums, and that relates to the concerns that some of our addresses are being taken abroad, that we are losing resources, so to speak. And we've made this investigation. On the left-hand side, or better said, on the right-hand side, you have the volume of IP addresses that were granted by Brazilian companies to companies abroad. In yellow are foreign companies that were assigned those addresses on the left, and finally, the ones that transferred to Brazilian companies. 58% of the addresses that were granted by Brazilian companies remained with Brazilian companies. But more than almost 42% of those addresses went abroad. Most of the addresses granted to Brazilian companies remained with Brazilian companies. But if you compare what went abroad and what was taken to Brazil, the ones that came from foreign companies to Brazil account for 13% of what was granted from Brazil to companies abroad. What people had been saying is that people wondering how many addresses are moving abroad. So we see in this chart that is not most of the addresses that were abroad. 60% of them remained in Brazil. I'm running out of time, but this is my last slide. I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but you can check this information later. So what came from Brazil, where were those companies? Most of them were in the US. And on the other side of it, it's a similar trend. What was granted, addresses granted from Brazilian companies to which countries they went. But I'm not going to get into the details. You can check this out later. So thank you very much. And I don't have time for questions, but we can talk during the week. Thank you very much. We are going to have a break for coffee. We will return in half an hour at 11:10. We will have a very interesting panel on technologies and implementation. I'll see you in half an hour.
do NIC.br,
I would like to now call the new panel. Euripides is the owner of data centers and all the infrastructure of NIC.br, and he's going to be the leader of the session. Good morning. I would like to thank Julio for the invitation, as well as the team from IX. In addition to myself, other people were going to join me here on stage. Daniel Brigato is the engineering manager of Ascent. He's an electrical engineer from FEI University with CDCP certification and CDCS certification. He's an expert in project management as well as budgeting. He's also knowledgeable in advanced data centers, telecom, and security in data centers. We'll also be joined by Peter from Equinix. Peter Preta. He's the Senior Director of Construction of Equinix. He's been working in the market of design, construction, and operation and mission critical equipment for over 30 years. He started working on Equinix 13 years ago, being the head of operations and construction, and he was responsible for the expansion and also building of new data centers in Brazil. He's currently responsible for construction in Latin America. He manages a portfolio of data centers that has received over $3 billion in investments in Brazil, Colombia, Chile, and Peru. Finally, so last but not the least, Franciele, engineering director and designer of Scala data centers. She has an MBA in project management from the University of São Paulo, graduate studies in photovoltaic energy from the University of Campinas, and she graduated in architecture. She's an expert in data center projects and has been working for over 10 years in this industry with over 25 projects that have been constructed. She led the team of designers in data centers in most of Latin American countries for several companies. So let me start by introducing myself. I am a manager of infrastructure engineering in Brazil, a graduate of NIC. I graduated in electrical engineering with a postgraduate studies in digital TV. Currently, I'm the coordinator of the Commission of Studies of Data Center of ABNT, and I'm going to talk about the standards on data centers at ABNT, which is the Brazilian Standardization Agency. We will then open for questions from the audience on any topic related to data centers. It's important for you to understand that data centers on this forum is being addressed for the first time in a meeting like this. People believe that the cloud is like a cloud, like everything is on the cloud, but people who actually make the cloud work are here, and they have a lot of knowledge on this. So let me start by making my own presentation.
Deixa eu ver. Okay. O verde aqui vai para frente, tá? Tá bom. Então aqui, ó, é uma definição que a gente obviamente traduziu
da... This is a definition of data center. We translated that from the ISO 22237 on what a data center is. Of course, it is a description from a standard, but it's just to give you some context. And talking about data center standards in general, the most widely known in our work are the ones listed here: BICC 022, also TEA 942B, ISO 22237 that started in 2018, and today it also has also been updated in 2021. And this year, ISO and IEC standards from the 22237 series were expanded, and the Brazilian committee at CB21 of ABNT translated the standard, the ISO standard, to Brazil. Unfortunately, in engineering, we don't have, like, ETF, some open standards. Some of the standards we have on data centers are open, while others are paid. Here is a list of some of these standards that we use. I'm also part of a project on CB55 related to ventilation and also air conditioning systems in IT environments. It's probably going to be ready next year for public consultation. This is a small summary of these standards. Again, those are existing standards on data centers. So here is a list of what they are, how they are classified, such as some are called tiers, some are called classes, like is the case of ISO and ABNT, and BICSs call them class F, ranging from F0 to F4. So there are differences related to this nomenclature. Here is a summary on how these standards behave. The chart brings differences. Uptime, for example, is a commercial company. For the uptime certification, you need to be certified by this company, which is really a benchmark in the market. So when you talk about uptime tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, it relates to that. 942 is another TIA standard. A lot of people are certified with it. In Brazil, some data centers are classified as tier 942. Recently, it was updated. This is when they included edge and micro data centers. BICS 002 is to be updated soon. The European standard on which ISO 22237 is based on dates back to 2019. And ISO 22237, ABNT standard is based on that, published 3 out of 3 standards were published after 2021. And the study commission I coordinate at ABNT, which is from Brazilian Committee 21, from Technology, Innovation, and Sustainability. That's the group we are part of. The Committee 039 is responsible for data centers. We also work on projects that we are developing right now. Part 1, General Concepts, has already been published. I will show you soon. It was published this year. Part 3, relating to energy distribution, has also been published as a Brazilian standard, and Part 4 as well. Part 5 is about to go into public consultation, and parts 2 and 6 related to construction and safety systems. The ISO standard is in the final draft international standard, FDIS. As for part 7, we are completing its translation.
Here we have a summary when each one of the norms were published. Today, we already have a data center Brazilian norm based on the ISO IEC norm. These 3 parts, we have one of them that is being submitted for public consultation. This is still a technical specification, but the ISO intends that within 2 years, they take a while to conclude their process, but they will become a non-standard. They are undergoing a review. The other one is still a technical specification, a TS, whereas part 2 and 6, they are under FDs. It's very likely that by next April they will become an international standard, and we are already translating them. So right after the publication of their ISO, we'll be able to publish our norm translated as well. If you have a set of publications and norms, we'll be able to have something very timely and much cheaper. We'll be able to have a data center certificate, which will be much more affordable, a Brazilian certification based on this framework of norms that we are working with. In addition, our commission carries out a number of other actions, such as the 22327, which is still a draft of technical specification. It is the KPI 31 for resilience. This is a key performance indicator for resilience. That's a very interesting KPI addressing electric systems resilience, but that will encompass some other systems such as air conditioning. And part 1 and part 2 of 8 to 36, they will be a baseline to become a standardization for managing data center infrastructure management. And the 002 Commission is working on the KPIs for data center parameters. We are already going through general concepts, overall concepts, which will undergo a public consultation very soon. Part 9WE is undergoing translation, as well as Part 7. I mean, those more specific KPIs, they are still being translated. The Commission thought that it would be ideal if we would start translating first those chapters. So we need volunteers, and we would appreciate your help and support. I will briefly share some aspects regarding ISO and the main sites that are part of the data center. Risk assessment, availability, categories, protection, energy efficiency. The part 1, which has already been published, covered all these aspects. Class 1 is very similar to uptime and 942, where we have class 1 to class 4, which are equivalent to tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have redundancy, tolerability pathways. We don't see much difference here in comparison to the other one. Classification for air conditioning, what they call as environmental control, telco, and energy, electric energy. I have extracted some from the Brazilian norm and standard, also from ABMT, and an update as that is quite new. How can we classify the protection categories that has been taken from the electric energy, and where we have to set metrics for POE, WE, KPI evaluation. And last but not least, I took this slide from another presentation that I gave NIC.br, where you see a level 2 availability, a small data center with some level of redundancy, some alternative pathways, redundant components, and level 4, which can cope with failures. My goal here was to be very straightforward and brief, to be able to introduce you the set of Brazilian norms, which I believe that by the end of next year, they will be available, and they might take companies to implement them. Some companies have already asked us to implement a certification program that will be done in sync to ABNT. That would be more affordable to classify our data center as part of a national norms and standards classification. Each and every one of our guests will make their own presentations. They will have around 15 minutes each, and then we are gonna save a time for Q&A. Here we have the three main companies, the three main representatives from Brazilian data centers. They are experts, so please take the best from their participation. I have a long list of questions. If you don't ask any, I will benefit from their presence. Having said that, I'd like now to hand over to Daniel. I will follow alphabetic order. So Daniel, please. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Euripides, for the opportunity, and of course, all of you for your time and availability. I will share part of our infrastructure and how AI may impact our data centers. This is today's agenda, what artificial intelligence is, how may we apply them, some air conditioning solutions, some other cooling solutions for KW and liquid cooling systems and solutions. So here we have a artificial intelligence definition according ChatGPT. That is becoming very popular in the market. I will not read the definition, but what it said here is that artificial intelligence is a field of computer science which is able to analyze and process data autonomously, imitating human ability of reasoning and learning, like our brain. But according to some studies, our brain is able to acquire 20% of energy while at rest. And similarly to our brain, new devices applied for AI, they will consume too much energy. Therefore, we'll need a very strong and robust cooling system to be able to cool down the machines. Some AI application examples: medical field, technology, finances, industries, oil, gas, and many other applications. Cooling rates by kilowatts. Up to 15 and 20, we are able to deliver standard air conditioning solutions. Queen row, confining, row-based. Once we reach higher energy consumption solutions, liquid cooling technologies are required. And for that, we have active passive rear door, cold plate, and immersion liquid cooling. I will illustrate each one of the solutions. Here are some of those current solutions that we are able to apply at our data centers. We have a direct expansion system where we have condensators externally and also internally. They are intertwined to the cooling system, which is responsible to exchange heat. Air cooling chillers. They are air chillers, I'm sorry. They are air chillers and the fan coilers. Chillers are usually outside and the fan inside. There is a closed water ring which is responsible for the heat exchange. And the air-cooled chiller is highly efficient with a WE. WE is a number which measures water efficiency. Our WE today with this solution is quite low, within the lowest range, the lowest rate in the market, 0.03. Some liquid cooling solutions. Rear door. There are active and passive. Active where the ventilators are, and the passive rear door, the hot air goes through the door. Cold water also exchanges throughout that same rear door. They are responsible to exchange heat, and the water is taken. An external water ring is taken to the sacks by another ring. Cold plate. Water gets into the server. The water ring will feed manifolds that will then take to the CDUs. Immersion is a third solution. Servers are inserted within the tanks with glycol or with water, and by that the cooling system will be possible. This is the most efficient system. However, that's not the most popular one yet. Rear door and cold plate are yet the most popular ones nowadays. This flow chart shows the liquid cooling system. External ring getting to the CDUs where a secondary ring gets to the racks. This is a secondary ring, over here a manifold, and here the chiller. Normally a water tank reservoir linked to the chiller that may exchange heat internally or externally. The chiller will feed the racks and the CDUs. CDUs may be internal or external to racks, and CDUs will feed the racks. Rear doors do not require confining. As the cold air gets on one side and server throws hot air to the opposite side, they will cool the air back again, bringing down the temperature with this solution. Accenti is at your disposal. We work with scale as well as enterprise clients level with 1-2 mega data halls, even 10 megawatts data halls. We apply different levels of technologies. Those with a high efficiency, always respecting sustainability. Our WE and PU are very low and highly efficient. I believe that other companies, they will also introduce their solutions, and all of us are extremely concerned about sustainability issues. Here my contact information. If you have any further questions, don't refrain from contacting me. Thank you.
Bom, na sequência, vamos...
So now we will have Franciella's presentation. I'm sorry, I guess I changed the sequence. Actually, it's going to be Peter Spetra's presentation from Equinix. He has just a few slides, but he's going to say a lot of things. I know he's going to talk a lot, and I hope that you'll make the best of his presentation. Feel free to ask him questions later.
Bom, pessoal, obrigado pelo convite do NIC.
Thank you for this invitation. I'd like to thank Nick for inviting me to come and deliver this presentation. You see that we did not talk beforehand because my presentation is also going to talk about liquid cooling. But the good thing is that Daniel made a very good presentation. So I'm going to skip part of my slides because of his introduction. And why is that so many people talk about liquid cooling? Because today, especially at commercial data centers, which we call multi-tenant data centers, those data centers are prepared for a normal low density. So you size your cold water system, you design the electrical demand for the average density of the market. And what have we observed? Customers have had much higher demands, and air cooling, which is typically used in all data centers, no longer has enough capacity to cool our customers' equipment. In this diagram, you can see that you have your cold water system. Then you have a closed loop that will take this cold water to the data center. Then you have devices that will have the heat exchange and will inject this cooler into the environment. There will be a heat exchange with the servers, and the air will return hot to the fan coil. The water becomes hotter, goes back to the cold water loop, and this is a permanent cycle. What have we been observing in commercial data centers, in multi-tenant data centers? We have explored all possibilities in terms of air treatment. So having a containerization of a cool corridor, of a warm corridor, installing doors that will allow hot air to move away from the rack. We have tried it all. So anything we could do that involved air, we've done it already. And there are a lot of smart people who think about possible solutions. And I think we have reached a threshold in the market. We cannot move beyond that. And now we started to think about different cooling solutions. And as Danielle showed, we need to get into our customer servers to find a good solution to be able to cool the chip of the processor in a more effective way. And we do that using a liquid, a fluid. It's not water. There are different ways of using that, so it's not just water. So let me go back to this multi-tenant commercial data center whose structure needs to be prepared both for the low density customers as well as for the high density customers. The air cycle remains, goes to the rack, there is a heat exchange, it goes back to the fan coil. But in addition to that, you install a heat exchanger. Is this technology new? No. Maybe some people who are here in the room who worked in the 90s putting together CPDs remember 3090 IBM's mainframes that we needed to take cold water into the CPD and connect that huge equipment. And what did they do back then? They used liquid cooling. But the demand was different. You would put cold water directly into the customer's equipment using very simple filtering system, and you would have a circuit inside the machine to ensure a high heat exchange back then. But what about today? Today we use a heat exchanger. This is a modern piece of equipment. You can put that at the beginning of the rack line. You have good efficiency, you have high efficiency heat exchangers available today. We were talking about redundancy, also in having a tiered like installation, have equipment that have redundant system like redundant pumps, redundant sources, redundant power supplies. Today, we inject liquid in the server, and that is returned to this heat exchanger. But in that case, we use a more appropriate liquid for that end. So the heat exchange is more efficient, and we'll have this heat exchange with the chip or with a component of your customer server. With that, you were able to control this process a little bit better. And as Danielle mentioned, there are three technologies that can be used in a data center. Cooling at the rack door, which is basically an improvement of this process. Because in fact, you're still having heat exchange using air at the customer server. But the system becomes more efficient, and it can do that using high capacity fans. In addition to that, the air conditioning system that other customers use as well will not be damaged. power is not so high, it's just up to 20 kilowatts. But the heat exchange between the airs and components is limited. And there are two other possibilities. One of them is ensuring heat exchange through the inert liquid at the server level. In that case, the server will have empty connections that will be linked to the system at the data center. That will ensure the heat exchange. In that solution, you would no longer need air, the cooling done by air. But depending on what you have installed, you would need the air-based cooling system. For the server itself, that wouldn't be necessary. And as Danielle said, the most efficient solution is the third one, which is the immersion solution. And in that case, your data center needs to be well adapted because you will need a tank with a liquid, and your customer will basically put the server inside this tank. So what is the main message here? We are talking about new technologies. This is a concept that has already been implemented. Today, it's the only way we can to be able to support racks of 40 or 50 kilowatts of processing. Maybe in the future there will be other solutions, but that's what we have today. Data centers such as ours at Equinix have this ability. There are 4 data centers with pilot projects implemented outside Brazil. So it's a functional project. You can mix a low solution with a high solution in different areas. So if your data center has one area with high density, another one with low density, and also if you have different customers within the same data center. And if you are interested in this solution, if you want to implement this technology in your application, please come and talk to the Equinix team that is here today. Let's talk about your demand. And sure, we can do that. We can implement that with redundancy, with good availability. That will, of course, the level of redundancy and availability will depend on the investment that we make, because of course it's not a cheap system. It is compatible with the level of investments you've made in your equipment, because the 40 kilowatts processing equipment is not cheap. Again, our Equinix team is available to help you, and our team is prepared for this demand, for discussing this with our solutions architecture team. We are able to support you in your business. So thank you. Thank you. Now let's move to the last presentation that will be made by Franciele Nogueira Rosa, the Engineering Director of Design at Scala Data Centers. Good morning. Thank you for this invitation. I would like to tell you about what we've been doing at the Latin American market. And it was great. And our colleagues also talked about artificial intelligence. I'm going to touch on that. And it's good because that has changed our industry. It's very good to hear different perspectives from other companies as well. So let me tell you about Scala data centers. Since this is a new company, I think it's important to tell you more about it and about our growth plan. So I will tell you how we've been supporting the AI and machine learning market in Latin America. Scala was created in 2020, so very young company. We were created with a clear mission to be the leading Latin American platform of sustainable hyperscale data centers. So we were focused on hyperscale data centers, and it's non-negotiable to be sustainable from day zero. We operate 100% of our data centers using clean energy, renewable and certified energy. So there are also some points related to P-way and W-way that I'll talk about later. And we're also carbon neutral. So we not only we use clean energy, but we're also carbon neutral. So let me tell you what we have accomplished so far, and also I will tell you about our strategy and our growth plan. When we were established in 2020, we created two data centers, one located in Tamboré, another one in the downtown São Paulo. We started with 25 megawatts in IT capacity, and we had about 150 employees. In 2021, we purchased another data center in the city of Campinas and created our first data center. This is when the Tamboré hyperscale data center was created. In 2022, we built another data center. That was the second data center, TB4, also located in Tamboré, close to São Paulo. This is the tallest vertical data center in Latin America. Since it was open, it remains this record. I'll also tell you why we decided to verticalize our data centers. This year has been a great year with a lot of milestones. We opened our second data center, TB5, which is now the tallest one, the tallest vertical data center in Latin America. We also opened new markets like in Rio. We created and also delivered our first data center in Rio this year, as well as another one in Chile. This was a very special year because we opened new markets, both in Brazil and also abroad. Our installed capacity is of 70 megawatts of IT, and we have 850 employees in our team. It's very important to show that we have a lot of capacity in IT. We're very proud of everything we've done. This is our approach, our verticalized approach in all areas. In this market, we need to move very quickly. We need to be agile. We need to be flexible. And this is why we verticalize our own engineering operations. All projects are developed in-house. And this is why our team is so large. We have developed all of them in-house, and our engineering center of excellence, called COI, has over 340 employees involving engineers, architects, and data center specialists. Our verticalized approach includes all disciplines that are developed in-house. Land feasibility, for example, so we work with a real estate team to understand where we want to invest. So we run the technical due diligence project, the executive project, the CFD. We do everything internally, and we also manage the construction, the supply chain, and commissioning. Because the market wants everything implemented faster and faster, and the demand on AI is very strong. So we need to deliver more capacity and faster. So this is one of the approaches that we use to be able to master our supply chain as a whole, as well as construction and operations. And that's the only way we can move faster. This is a nice picture. Even our dog, or Scaly, helps us in our operations. Innovation goes hand in hand with our engineering team. So here are some data centers. TB1 was the one we first purchased, then TB3 was the one that we first built, then TB4, the tallest data center in Latin America, the second tallest TB5, SP2, which is in São Paulo downtown, that we purchased when we purchased TB1, then Campinas 1 that we purchased the following year, and São João do Meriti in Rio and Curuama in Chile. In São João do Meriti in Rio, we use a different approach. Since we have our own engineering resources, we try always to serve our customers as quickly as possible. This data center proved to be very useful because we're able to deliver in record time by using new products. We built some modules, and those modules do not get in the way of future expansions. So we can deliver smaller capacities in a much shorter period of time and still be able to expand in the future. So data centers are focused on the hyperscale market, but still with a very tight delivery date. And we are also very proud of our Tamboré campus that allows us to have more connectivity. We expect to have 600 megawatts of IT capacity. So you can imagine the levels of consumption. It's among the 10 largest campuses in the world and the largest one in Latin America. Our verticalized approach was intended to maximize land use, since it's a very attractive position to our customers because of the connectivity, because of its location. So the structure we already have that should be verticalized to make a better use of the land and to be able to implement a total IT capacity of 600 megawatts. In this lower part of the picture, you will see where we started building. This is close to a major highway close to São Paulo, around São Paulo. And some of these buildings have already been delivered, while others are being built and others are still in the planning phase. In the upcoming years, we are going to implement all these data centers.
Over here, a little bit of our growing strategy. In Brazil, we are based in São Paulo, Campinas, Tamboré, Rio de Janeiro, São João do Meriti, Fortaleza. We are planning Porto Alegre down south. It will be ready next year. Chile, we also have a data center, one already in operation and another two to be done. Colombia, we have one in operation and another one to be planned. So this is a little bit of our scalable strategy. And our strategy is very clear. We have raised the bar of some existing markets, and we are opening some new markets. We have opened a new market thanks to the connectivity cable, which will link Chile to other regions. Future-proof, just some highlights about it. There is a high demand for artificial intelligence. This is not a new technology, but this year with ChatGPT, we see a massive use of AI. AI can be, machine learning can, is able to ability the AI to be agile within a significant response time. We will need dense, robust, and potent racks that will interfere in our daily data center activities. Our average density was of 5 kilowatts, then we had increased to 10, 20, up to 100 kilowatts. Usually we see an average of 20 to 40 kilowatts. 70 and 100 is still being implemented. So we see an evolution in the AC system to be able to comply with the high demands. This is our future-proof data hall design. With new technologies, we have to be fast. With our engineering sector, we have several solutions and what is feasible to be implemented in our data centers. This is the TB9 at Tamboré field. This is our campus of São Paulo, where we are able to be flexible and place racks as up to 70 kilowatts, ranging from 15 to 70. With a hybrid system, our data hall is ready to comply with this level of flexibility. Users may start with a certain type of AC and later on they may move to a hybrid system, air and liquid, both. There is a difference in scalability. We use no high floor to cool down our environment. No data centers will use a high floor and just the aerial infrastructure and not the under infrastructure. Our cooling system is environmental one, adding high efficiency. 1.3, 135 AP1 levels, and WA it's 0 as we work on a water closed circuit to allow us to reach good levels of KPIs or well-implemented levels of KPIs. This is an external view of our data center. We may activate or deactivate the tubes or the pipes according to our client's request. We cannot forecast 100% of our future, but whatever we may be able to forecast, we'll do it in advance. So I hope that I made very clear the needs and the use for AI. The rest of our staff from Scala is around the event, and you just, approach and talk to us if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Bom, eu agradeço aí aos três palestrantes.
Thank you to the three of you. I would like to start by opening the floor to our participants. You may address your questions to any one of them. Please just use the mics to ask your questions. Anyone? We have a question from Bertoldo. Hi there. No, I am Eduardo from Telefônica Telco. What is your business case forecast to work with data centers which are not within the route São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro? I understand you have projects for Porto Alegre down south, but how about other regions of the country? maybe the north or northeast region. Who'd like to start? Go ahead, Daniel. Well, today, besides São Paulo and Rio, we have data centers in Chile, Colombia, but so far we don't have any other data centers in any other regions. But it's just a matter of our customers' desire. We are ready to set data centers somewhere else. We cannot hear her. Her mic is really, really low. Fortaleza next year. But there is no additional demand to open data centers in any other regions because there is no demand. But once we get demands for opening data centers in some other regions in the country, we can do it. Equinix, we are mainly serving the route São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, in addition to Colombia, Chile, and Peru. And expanding to other markets, that is a matter of a higher demand. Our business development sector is always very careful to our customers' demands. And if we understand that there is a need for that, we may open a new data center, or maybe we are going to investigate if there is any other data center available in the market that can be acquired and then become a part of our portfolio that will be able to meet the standards. I have a question. Good morning. I have a question along the same lines. Let's suppose that in Europe, in the European continent, we have around 20 internet users per square meter, whereas in the Latin market, we have 24 users. I'm talking about users and not population. 24 users of internet per square meter. The internet penetration in Europe is around 96%, if I'm not wrong, whereas the internet penetration in Latin America is 74%. We still have some room for improvement, right? And now my question, what sort of criteria that operators like you guys are using, or what sort of feelings do you have that your needs, that your clients are demanding? Fortaleza, Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, and Chile. Fine. You have 3 hubs, but the distance in RTT, the distance between São Paulo and Manaus in the Amazon region, which are the non-covered traffic points, we have RTTs that that can be running 100 or 200,000 milliseconds. What is the criteria that you take into account, especially in the global south? And by that I mean Africa, Brazil, Latin America, to set new data centers. Because if we compare the number of data centers, internet penetration, population, number of users, I mean, the region as a whole is not really well served. What will drive such a demand? Customers' request or your own request by choosing different regions? Well, I have a similar question to yours, and I will add to it. How do you all three see the edge data center building up, which could be an alternative to those larger data centers present in the main hub between São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Who'd like to start? We were founded in 2020 with a very clear mindset. Our founders, they have a US base where the American market was highly saturated, especially the state of Virginia, and they understand that we have to pave the infrastructure data center markets in Latin America. So that is very clear from a scale perspective. And our goal and mission is to pave data center markets so internet will allow more coverage in the region. Our approach is to work on existing markets, but Porto Alegre is a new market. Therefore, our approach there is to prospect new clients and to increase the coverage in that region, as Porto Alegre is close to Argentina, Uruguay. And we were aware that a underground cable, a submarine cable, would reach that region. With that in mind, we increased our business to reach that demand. We wanted to increase our capacity building by growing our internet coverage. In Rio de Janeiro, our approach can be both edge and hyperscale. Our modes, they work on 600 kilowatts that can be placed just anywhere. They are modules. They are small modules that can be placed anywhere, but that has to do with our clients' demands. We are a co-location company, and all our data centers are rented according to our carriers and customers' demands. At Equinix today, we have customers all over the country, and we are able to deliver services to those customers thanks to our both data centers in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And we split our demands between those two hubs, São Paulo and Rio. So far, we haven't got at Equinix an edge data center project. Our main emphasis is on a minimum capacity data center and to foster as much as possible the ecosystem. And we see that ecosystem as our main strength, as we see ourselves as a place where other companies are able to connect to other clients thanks to our own ecosystem. Today, so far, with those two hubs, São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, we are able to meet our expectations. But if we see an additional demand in some other regions of the country, maybe in the north or south region, we may open other data centers somewhere else. Why not? We have some data center edge studies not yet implemented, but we are waiting for some baseline customers to build that up. If there is not a high demand for that site, it might be useless to open a new site if we are not pretty sure about the level of demand at that specific site. But today, we are able to deliver services to other regions of the country throughout our data centers based in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Let's see if I got your message clearly. As far as I understood, if you have any hyperscale which would like to move to that area, right? You would need some sort of big client that would like maybe to go to Manaus or Belém with the 2 or 3 million inhabitants. Is that so? Yes, exactly. You are right. We have dedicated data centers for enterprise use only, but if there is a specific demand with a significant volume that would be a high enough demand to open a standard data center, we are ready to do it. Why not? Okay, thank you.
Então, sou o Júlio do NIC.br.
I am Julio from NIC.br. Actually, we are your
E
customers.
assim, a pergunta é, a gente trabalha com equipamentos, né,
We work
de switches, routers, né,
with the
equipamentos
routers, with
de rede, né,
equipment that
eu não
work
sei se
on
daqui a
a
10 anos
network high
a gente vai ter que
capacity.
usar
And I
liquid
wonder
cooling
if
para
within 10 years we will need a liquid cooling
como é que a gente vai
to
fazer
manage and operate
chegar no
equipments like
de
those.
vocês lá e ó,
Will it be possible to get to one of your data centers
ou
and request a liquid
simplesmente
cooling for a
refrigeração
certain data center,
até
or those more modern
agora
and
para
advanced
grandes
liquid
projetos,
cooling
né,
systems
ou
are
como é que
just
a gente vai,
for
né, quer dizer,
large
a gente vai
projects
ter que
like
ter
right now,
equipamentos
or
aí
what do you
de refrigeração,
foresee in the future
liquid cooling
in
on
terms
demand,
of cooling? Yes, we are thinking about what? Liquid cooling on demand? Is that so?
Vejo da seguinte forma, Júlio.
Well,
Nos data centers existentes,
in the
onde
existing
já tem
data
uma
centers, Julio,
infraestrutura
where we
capacitada,
already have a
o
mature
data center já
infrastructure,
concebido
and that the
para uma
data
baixa
center
densidade,
has been
para você
created to work on low densities, I would say that it's going to be more difficult to adapt the infrastructure, to adapt to technologies as such.
os novos
But according to our company, the new data centers, the so-called market to the infrastructure is already developed to
baixa densidade,
fulfill both demands, low capacity, which has been the highest volume so far, but also
dedicada
to be able to implement a dedicated installation
e
for
de alta
new
densidade,
customers with a high density
respondendo
demand.
os data centers mais antigos
In the
com
oldest data
tecnologia
centers, those that will
implementada aqui no
or
Brasil,
that are working with a less updated technology, that will be more complicated. But the new ones,
para atender
they
essas
are,
demandas.
ready to cope with the demands like that. On accent, most of data centers can use liquid cooling. Some solutions have been implemented, not in Brazil, but in Chicago, for example, at digital data centers. The data hall had been initially designed with a direct expansion solution, and that was adapted to use liquid cooling. There are smaller internal chillers that can be installed and then use liquid cooling for these racks. But I think that the number of racks that will require liquid cooling will just be for machines with high processing levels like the ones we have for NVIDIA, HP, and others, because each of these machines have a lot of consumptions, over 6 kilowatts each. So for servers or for storage solutions, this may not be necessary. But anyway,
The data centers that we are designing will have a mixed solution, not just using liquid cooling, but also using the environment cooling solutions because air-based, because some racks will not need liquid cooling. I agree. We need to have a high density rack to be able to use liquid cooling so that the data center will become more efficient. And as I mentioned before, Scala is launching future-proof buildings. In those buildings, we use a hybrid air conditioning system. So the liquid cooling pipeline had already been installed as we built those buildings. And as the high density racks are being installed, then we can use the complementary system, the liquid cooling system, if necessary. Do we have time for more questions? For another question, if nobody has a question, I will ask a question to our three speakers. Based on the uptime statistics of this year, it's a technical question, maybe. Of the outages that we had reported, 44% are still power outages, followed by network outages, and 13% of outages relate to cooling system outages. And so as to power, 40% relate to UPS, 27% relate to a transfer key, and 27% related to generators. So apparently nothing has changed. We are still facing the same problems. Transfer keys, UPS, and generators, are they the same pieces of equipment that are faulty? When you talk about outage, you were talking about a fault that will impact our customers' operations. I think you need to go back to the root cause, the design of your data center. This is why you need to make sure that your installation will allow this type of equipment failure. Because of course you will have equipment maintenance, you will have your equipment ready to be used. You run countless tests before delivering the final project to start being operated. But equipments will have failures from time to time. So this is why you should have a very robust design that will ensure that your customer's load will be protected regardless of where that particular failure takes place. Well, there is bad luck sometimes, right? You might have two pieces of equipment that will be faulty. But usually, when you design a data center, especially a commercial one, you try to predict all potential failures that could happen and you try to mitigate this impact. Great. I think we should move on considering that these elements are still the key points we should focus to be able to create a fault-proof solution. Any comments? No, I agree with what he said, Danielle. No, I agree with what he said. What I could add is that the operations team should be well trained to be able to solve any problems. But as Pedro said, I think the design phase is the most important point. Because we could have faults. Yes, we still need to support failures. We are not failure proof at this point. Well, I've been told that time is up. So I would like to thank Peter, Franciel, and Danielle for their talks. And also would like to thank them for their willingness of being here and answer these questions. So once again, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate IAC's opportunity to present these new technologies and also the return of the use of liquid cooling. It's made its comeback. We still need to use that despite the high demand of the servers. We still need to keep our services up, so we need liquid cooling. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muito obrigado a todos.
I would like to thank everyone for attending.
Agora eu gostaria de convidar o Akira Kato.
I would like to invite Akira Kato to talk about the award in São Paulo.
Good afternoon. This is Akira Kato from Wide Project. You okay? So in the 4 years ago, I came to this particular meeting and present something about the root DNS system. But the real object to visit São Paulo was to negotiate with the possibility to host Emerald Anycast in this country so that we may be able to serve the Latin America better. But unfortunately, just after the 4 years ago IX Forum meeting, COVID-19 was happened and interrupted our conversation seriously. So, but now most of the fear of the COVID has been gone, and we were able to resume the conversation with the Mr. Federico Neves from NIC.br in this summer at the San Francisco IETF. During that time, Emerald has been working with APNIC so that APNIC has the obligation to or mission to promote the infrastructure of Asia Pacific region. So we are working with APNIC to get support, and small Anycast node like Brisbane, Hanoi, Guam, Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Bangkok, and some other cities are getting operational. And also we have the largest site in Singapore and Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been just operational. So we are going to talk. We have been talking with the Federico so that the São Paulo is very good location, and a lot of ISPs are get connected to the ix.br. So it is not appropriate to place a small Anycast which consists of one server, but instead we are negotiating with NIC.br to host the full large site. And the equipment list has been fixed just after the conversation, and the order of the equipment has been placed. So now I'm returning back to São Paulo again to install the Emerald servers in São Paulo. But unfortunately, some of the equipment is still waiting for the delivery. But I'm pretty sure that we may be able to start the service in next month, or at the most in the February. So anyway, we are very much excited to serve this particular region, and we'd like to thank wonderful support and collaboration from various people from NIC.br team. So thank you very much. Obrigado.
Thank you, Akira. Bom, pessoal, agora a próxima atividade nossa é comer um pouco. Tá?
We'll now break for lunch. Our next activity involves eating. Lunch will be served here at our meeting premises, sponsored by our sponsors, and there will be 4 stations where you can help yourselves with food, for those obviously who are at the meeting premises. This is kind of a rotation lunch system. Unfortunately, we were not able to have enough space for a proper sitting lunch. But feel free to help yourselves with food. And if you prefer, of course, you can eat elsewhere. But of course, we would like to keep everybody here for some networking opportunities as well during the lunch break. We will be back at 2 p.m. Thank you. Wish you a nice lunch.